People often ask me about giving to the church and how can a church function if they're not giving. Um, People get a little upset when I talk about tithing, and so let me go to a part two here. The problem here is that the answer must be multifaceted. Some churches don't operate like your church. Some churches have built their church from the ground up and they paid for it fully, and so they don't need to browbeat you all over tithing. Notice, churches that are debt free do not spend a whole lot of time in the offering time. They do not, because they're already debt free. They own the building, they own assets, they own the fleece of cars or buses outside, and they have extra money in the bank to do whatever they need to do, which frees them up to give to the poor. Your church may not be that in that situation. Believe it or not, your church can't afford to give to the poor. Now, isn't that something that your church is set up? The ecclesia is set up to just give offerings, and 80% or more of that offerings go to bills. That means the mortgage, it goes to a bank, utilities, and then salaries. What's left, when the same people who are giving can't pull from that place, the world does this better than the church do. So how does the church survive? The church survived the way they always been surviving. You know, the church is a couple thousand years old. The first century church gave to each other. They bought and sold, and they had all things common. You can't do that in this economy. You can't do that in this dispensation. You can't do it. No one does that today unless you are a subgroup. Some of the smaller groups, like the Hispanics here in the city, they are smaller groups. Some of the Asians, they're smaller groups, so they buy and sell amongst themselves in their communities. The black communities don't do that. You go walk up and down some of our communities, and most of the businesses in my community are owned by Asians, meaning Indian and China or Japanese or Pakistan or something like that, or it's a white or it's a Jewish. But in my neighborhood, you can count on one finger the black businesses that are here. But when you go to church, you have a different mindset. All right. So Paul wrote a letter to the Corinthians and told them what to do with their monies. At the end of the week, get a certain percentage together from your money. He didn't tell you how much it was, and give to the church freely from your heart and not under compulsion. What happens when you go to church? Compulsion. They put fear tactics in you so that you can give. Then Paul says, then in chapter 8, chapter 9 of Corinthians, he said to give. He says, so when I get there, I'll pick it up. And what was he going to do with it? He was going to give it to another church that was poor. Do y'all do that today? No. There is nothing that you're doing in church today in giving that you can back up in the scriptures. Absolutely nothing. The church at large do not collect an offering so that they can give it to another poor church. You don't see that nowhere. Is there one or two? I'm sure there is. But you don't see it, do you? No. And if you are told that if you give to your church, God is going to overtake you with blessings and what have you, you believe that because that's all you've been hearing. But here's the problem. You owe bills at home. Your light bill is overdue. As a matter of fact, you're a month behind. So they give you a month grace. Your gas is the same way. Your car is the same way. Your mortgage and your rent is the same way in many cases. And your credit report is really bad. And you're filing for chapter 7, chapter 13, what have you. And you think that God is going to bless you because you gave money to at that brick and mortar that he says, I don't even dwell in there. You see, you don't go to church. What you do is the church go to a building and they come together. They raise money to pay the bills at that church. But they're telling you that here's how we're going to do. We're going to tell you that if you keep doing this, God is going to keep blessing you. But if that church is not putting that money and giving it to those who are in need, then what are you doing? You can't find no scripture background on what you're doing. So when I constantly get the question of how does the church survive without a tithe, they have always been surviving without a tithe. Tithe has always been food, has never been money. But even when you made it money, the church has always survived by giving, period. And when people come together, in a building that you bought, take care of your asset. It's yours. Take care of it. Well, it's almost yours because you got a mortgage on it. You know the bills are due every month. Do we have to remind you? All right. So when you think you got to you got to get your paycheck, take a percentage, which you call a tithe, and then take another percentage, which is whatever, which is your offering, and those two it's a mind game. It's a psychological mind game. Just take a percentage of your money, like Paul said, give it to the church so that the church can pay its bills, so that you can worship in that building with the air hitting you in the face when in the summertime and the air hitting you in the face in the wintertime. You can flick the lights and the lights come on, the microphone is on, and you can go to the bathroom and allow whatever's within you to go out into the drought. Okay, and the toilet works because there's flowing water. All these things, the church is there to shield us and protect us from the outside element. That building is not the church. And if that place burns down, did the church burn down? Absolutely not. So you all are asking the wrong questions. The question is, what are you doing at home? Because when you ask certain questions, it tells me that you think that is where God only dwells on Sunday at that place you called a church. Is he not in your home? Are you not paying bills? Are you not good stewards of the debt that you owe? What do you do with your money? Do you ever give to the poor? Most of you probably do not. And your church is not giving to the poor either, right? So we got a problem. How can you lend to God if you're not giving to the poor? So you're giving to the church is taking that, paying bills, and they can't afford to give to the poor, and you can't find nowhere in the scriptures, in the New Testament, in the better covenant, on how you're giving. And then when you give, you're telling us that God is blessing you, but yet I have not paid a tithe in forever, yet I'm debt free, and my college tuition is paid for. How am I different from you? Now you know. Go to patreon.com and type in the Sirwalterj Show, and I got more for you.